morning. It's good to see you this morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chad, and it's just great to be with you here this morning. If you're here for the first time, second time, third time, feeling things out, I mean, really what Allison said is so true. We just want you to enjoy yourself, to just kind of sit back and relax. And if you kind of feel like, man, this is great, but I just don't really think God's maybe got a different place for me. We have relationships with so many other churches in our city. We'd love to connect you somewhere if Crossroads is not for you. Just because we believe that if we just focus on the big K, the big kingdom, more than building our little kingdom, that God takes care of it all along the way. And that His heart for you and I is to be actively a part of a family, traveling together to continue His mission. That's what we're wired to do. You were created in His image. Now, sin means missing the mark. And so you've missed the mark, I've missed the mark to truly represent God, to rule and reign on His behalf. However, Jesus has come to redeem that. And Jesus, on the cross, He takes on the weight of that sin, missing the mark. And He defeats it to free us so that now we could live into who we're called to be, that we could truly represent Him within the world. And that always means in the context of family. That's what Jesus came to do. He didn't come to build a church. He didn't, as far as the building, He didn't come to create an organization. He came to rebuild God's family. And we just believe that is the church. And so we're a huge family, right? I mean, it's a huge family. And we got some crazy aunts and uncles, we're like, well, I don't know about them. And some folks look at us and think, I don't know about them. But nonetheless, we're a big family. And so if there's, a place where you'd like us to help, we'd love to just offer that to you. Second thing is we were just singing, and man, it was just great singing this morning with you all. I just thought about this, and I don't know if this is for anyone. I just want to put it out there. I just want you to know that we're not optimistic people, all right? Optimism is thinking about what possibly could be. We're hopeful people. And hope isn't based upon what could be. Hope is grounded in the truth of what already is. Which that Jesus is our hero and our king who has defeated death and sin once and for all and invited us into His life. So we're not people of optimism. We're people of hope based upon what God has already done. All right? So last week, we started a journey looking at the life of Peter. And we're going to take last week and this week to look at his life, and then the next several weeks to really hear what does this man have to say to us as he writes to the early church as we read some of his letters over the next coming weeks. And last week we looked at the journey of Jesus' life into calling Peter and the disciples into his life, and actually then the discipleship journey of Peter. So we saw where Jesus' family, biological and religious family, rejects him. And Jesus has to go and find a new family. And so He travels to Capernaum. He heals Peter's mother-in-law and her household. She's the matriarch of the family. It's an extended family. The Greek word is oikos. It is a group of that 20 to 50 people. It's the thing that we're going for in missional community. It's how they lived and did life together. There, in that moment, He heals her. Jesus then is invited kind of into their family. They begin to do life together. And we see that Jesus is a friend. He's a friend. And so the first step for Peter is just to be a friend. And friend is always about serving. It's a mutual serve thing. Jesus is serving their household. I'm sure it's reciprocated back. And it gets to that place where Jesus finally walks along the shore and he sees Peter and Andrew and a couple others out fishing. He says, hey guys, why don't you try on the other side of the boat, let the net down. But the thing is, you remember, Jesus is not a fisherman, he's a builder. His dad was a tecton, it's like a general contractor. He's a builder. And so he's telling these guys who know how to fish, hey, why don't you let your nets down over here? And they do it. They catch more fish, than they have. They haven't caught any all night. And Jesus then says, come and drop your nets, come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. He invites Peter to be a follower. And following is all about leveraging what you have for someone else. So Peter he drops his nets, right? And then leverages, I'm going to fish for people. He's going to leverage his gifts and graces for Jesus. And then we saw the move in Matthew 16 where there's a conversation about who Jesus is. And Jesus looks at Peter and says, well, who do you say I am? And Peter says, well, you're the Son of God. You're the King of Kings. You're the Lord of Lords. You are the Messiah, the one we've been waiting for, Lord. And Jesus says, well, Peter, the only way that you would ever be able to say that is the Father gave it to you. At that point, his name is Simon. He then says, from now on, your name will be Peter, the rock. I'm the big rock. You're the little rock. And upon this rock, I will build my church. He's now inviting Peter, who's a fisherman, into his life because he's a builder. He's inviting him into his family. And family is always about surrender. And surrender is about trusting with everything. So we see the journey from friend to follower to family. Serve, submission, and surrender. Help, leverage, and trust. And here's, this is what I think is really important in this journey. Is if ever I get to a place where I think in my life that Jesus, I think I've surrendered a lot. I don't think I'm ready to surrender any. I think I've done enough. I think I've sacrificed enough for you, Jesus. Whenever that statement creeps into my heart, I've entered into a world of entitlement where all of a sudden I've communicated in my heart that what I've done for Jesus is more important than what he's done for me on the cross. So I will never serve him the way that he served me. I'll never be able to submit to him fully the way that he was submitted to me. And I'll never be able to surrender the way he was able to surrender to me. So that's where we kind of ended last week. So we pick it up there. And it's such an interesting story. Peter is kind of this ambitious kind of guy, right? And so right after this encounter, Jesus then goes into a conversation with the disciples about how he's going to be led away and crucified and killed. And Peter says, bro, we're family now. I got you. Got you. I will not let that happen. I'm Peter, right? You watch me beat up everybody else. I'm that guy. It won't happen to you. I'll save you, Jesus, right? And Jesus says, Satan, get behind me. Isn't that interesting? He renames Peter, invites him into his family, and then calls him Satan. I love that about Jesus. I just love it about him. All right, let's just look at that real quickly. Matthew 16. We're going to jump around a little bit today. All right. I've literally had this person call me nonstop for 35 minutes. It's okay. It's okay. We're gonna take care of this. We're gonna turn it off. There we go. All right. So Matthew 16. Let's see. Verse 22. But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him. Peter took Jesus aside to reprimand him for saying such things. Heaven forbid, Lord, he said, this will never happen to you. And then Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's." Whenever I'm seeing things from a human point of view, whenever I'm looking at a situation from a human point of view, I'm trying to get out in front of Jesus. And whenever I'm trying to get out in front of Jesus, I'm representing a different kingdom than his, right? I just need to hear myself. I need to hear, like, get behind me, Satan. You're out in front of me right now. Get behind me. Get behind me. We also, if we fast forward, we see that Peter's at the Last Supper with the disciples with Jesus. It's the night before he's going to be arrested. And there, Jesus tells Peter, as Peter says, again, like, "I will never deny you, Lord. I'll never turn my back on you." And Jesus says, "Well, indeed, you will deny me. You'll deny me 3 times, bud. 3 times before the rooster crows." After that, Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray the night that in the place where he is arrested. And eventually, the folks come to arrest him. The religious leaders and others come to get him. And as they go to arrest him, there seems to be an altercation. And do you remember what Peter does? He cuts off one of the guard's ears. Right? Just cuts it off. Right? And then he follows, and when he does that, Jesus says, "Put it away, bud." Again, basically saying, you're out in front of me. You're thinking from a human point of view. Get behind me. Your ambition is preventing my work. And so then, Peter follows Jesus to where he's arrested. And there, he denies him. He denies him 3 times. Now, the more and more that I think about this moment with Peter in his life, I don't think he denies Jesus because he's afraid. I mean, let's just look at Peter's life. He steps up in Matthew 16 and says, "I'll never let them kill you." And then the guard is there, and he cuts the guard's ear off, like, "No, you're not taking him." Those aren't actions to me of somebody who's afraid. It sounds like someone who thinks he's the one that needs to be the protector of. And so I think the more and more I read the story and the more I'm chewing on it over the course of my life and my discipleship, I think if Peter's afraid, he doesn't even go to the house. I think that maybe he's there to rescue Jesus. And so he's like on this covert operation, right? Are you with him? No, I'm not with him, but just wait, buddy, and you're going to find out. That sort of thing. That he's trying to take matters into his own hand. And then it dawns upon him the 3rd time that he rejects Jesus. It dawns upon him that he's rejected his family. It dawns upon him that he has not owned his identity of who he is. He's lied, he's rejected and lied about who he is. See, the only difference between Peter and Judas, remember, Judas is the one that sold Jesus out for some money. The only difference between Peter and Judas is that Peter doesn't take his life. Judas does. They both rejected who they are, who they belong to. And then, the next time that we see Peter in John chapter 21, do you remember what he's doing? He's fishing. He goes back to the very thing he was doing when Jesus first called him. He goes back to that prior vision. He goes back to what he knows. And then in that moment, Jesus appears. And Jesus is cooking some food, which I think is there because John wants us to know that Jesus isn't a ghost. Ghosts don't cook fish, right? People cook fish. And so Jesus is risen from the dead. He's cooking some fish. He looks out, and there is Peter and some others, and they're fishing. And in verse 4 of John 21, it goes like this. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Hey, fellows, have you caught any fish?" It's the exact same thing he asked when he first calls Peter to be a follower. No, they replied. And then he said, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll get some. I mean, I wonder if they're thinking like, I've heard this before. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish. And then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic. I'm not sure what that is. I guess it's a hat thing, right? For he had stripped it for work. He jumped into the water and he headed to shore. Like, I just kind of imagine, I don't know if you remember Forrest Gump. You remember when Forrest sees Lieutenant Dan? Yeah, it just kind of like reminds me of that moment. In fact, I just thought it'd be good, just visually, if we just took a look at it this morning. We've got a clip up here, so let's take a look. I mean, I imagine that's kind of what Peter was like a little bit, you know? There he goes. I mean, you imagine what Jesus is thinking? Like, I can't believe I've got this to deal with, right? Oh. And probably also thinking, I am so thankful that this one right here loves me so much.
Lieutenant Dan, what are you doing here?
Well, thought I'd try out my sea legs.
Well, you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan.
Yes, I know that. You wrote me a letter, you idiot. Well, Captain Forrest Gump, I had to see this for myself. And I told you if you were ever a shrimp boat captain that I'd be your first mate. Well, here I am. I am a man of my word.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't you be thinking that I'm going to be calling you sir.
No, sir. It's my...
But I kind of feel like it's one of those moments, right? That sort of happening. Peter realizes it's the Lord. And he's like, I've got to get to the shore. And he gets to the shore, and he gets there, and Jesus says this. Do you love me more than these? And I think Jesus is pointing to the fish, as if to say, do you love me more than that vision for your life? Fish, that's your vision, right? That's what you've been doing. Now you're back doing it. Do you love me more than these? And the love word that Jesus uses there is agape love. It's like big, unconditional, like I'm going to love you even if you don't love me back kind of love. And Peter responds with, Lord, of course I love you. And the love word that Peter uses is phileo. And that's more like a friendly kind of love, right? A reciprocated kind of love. And I think what's happening there in Peter's life is he's realizing this. He's come to terms with, I can't love him the way that he loves me. I thought that I could. I thought that maybe it was my job to step in and save Jesus. But that's not my place. It's not my place. I could never come close to doing all that he's done for me. So I think it's really a place of humility for Peter. And Jesus says, use shepherding language. He says, feed my sheep. And then he says again, do you love me? Peter responds again, of course I love you, Lord. He says, take care of my sheep, feed my lambs. The shepherding language is interesting also because shepherding, that's the worst job. The reason that David, remember the story of King David, and David's a shepherd? The reason he's the shepherd, he's the youngest son. The youngest son gets the worst job. Like, you don't want to go do the shepherding duties for the family. It's as if Jesus is saying this. Yeah, I want you back in, but there are consequences. And you don't just get to come back right where you were. We're going to have to start right here because there's some character development that has to take place. However, my vision for your life hasn't changed. It's as if Jesus is saying to Peter, I haven't changed my mind about you. Now, are you where you need to be right now? No, you're not. Do we have some work to do to mine out the character that you need to really carry the weight? Where my vision for you is this: upon this rock I will build my church. I haven't changed my mind. My mind has not changed for you in your life. But we've got to work. We've got some work to do to get there. We've got some work to do to get there. Well, what's this look like in our lives? You know, last week, we see Peter at his best. We see him moving from friend to follower to family. But then this week, we see that even when he's exactly where he should be, that he rejects that completely. That he's not perfect. And I think it's so important for you and I to realize that we're not going to be perfect in our relationship with Jesus. It's important for us to realize that we're not going to be able to love Jesus exactly the way that he loves us. But it's equally as important for you and I to remember and realize that Jesus' plan and purpose for your life and my life isn't conditional upon your ability to love him the way that he loves you. That his plan and purpose for your life is something that he's chosen. It's a choice that he's made. And Jesus hasn't changed his mind for your life. And so if you're here this morning within your life, and maybe you feel like that you've rejected Jesus in some way, maybe that you've put the family on the back burner, maybe that you've chosen the fish, you've chosen your vision for your life over his vision for your life, he hasn't given up on you, even if you've given up on him. His vision for your life, for my life, hasn't changed. But in fact, he prepares a meal for us. He stands on the shore and he calls to you from where you are. He calls to me from where I am. Now, the call is not there to save us from the consequences of our actions. The call, in fact, is an invitation to be restored into the family, but also to develop the necessary character that we need to grow in his character within our life. And here's what I'm learning. The only way that I grow in the character of Jesus is if I'm able to see my incompetence in my life, the places where I'm getting it wrong. It's not until I'm aware of those that I can actually move through them. So Cammie spent the night at a friend's house. That's our oldest daughter, on Friday night. And she came home yesterday, and Jordan, my oldest son, calls me laughing. I'm like, well, what's going on? He's like, I think Cammie's eyebrows are shaved. And I said, I don't think Mia would do that. That's who she spent the night with, you know? Well, I don't know. Cammie said maybe when she was asleep, that Mia did it. And so we get, Cammie around the table, Amanda and I, and finally we just said this. Here's what you need to know, Cammie. Here's a picture of you, and then here's a picture of you now. There is stuff missing right here. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. You need to know that. We're going to get to the bottom of it. So if you need to come clean about something, you need to come clean. Because it went from like, well, someone walked by me at school and they had scissors in their hands. And Amanda said, well, they had scissors next to you walking by you. And, Oh my gosh. I'm like, you said you were sleeping. I mean, did you guys have anything you shouldn't have had? I know you're only 10, but I mean, it's a sleepover. What's going on? And finally she said, let me go upstairs. And so she went upstairs, came back downstairs. She had this little green trimmer thing that Jordan got for Christmas. And she said, I just didn't know how it would work, and I didn't want to do it on my hair or my arm, so I thought I'd try my eyebrow. And then when I cut it, I needed to make the other one look the same so it wouldn't look weird. All right. Now, my hunch is, she's probably not going to do that again. She's become aware of some incompetency in her life, right? And she's dealing with the consequences. The same is true with God's call upon our life. Jesus' call to your life and my life is not to save us from the consequences. It's to call us back to the family. But it's also there for our character to develop. And the only way our character develops is if we own where we are and what we've done. And the result of that is we're able to have a better view of ourselves, a more sober view of who we are. And that soberness gives us a humility to realize that we're not the Savior, that we can't love the way that He loves. And yet He still hasn't changed His mind about us yet. I just think the question I'd leave you with this morning is this. The same question that He asked Peter. Do you love me more than these? These being your vision for your life. The life you're able to create for you. Do you love Jesus more than you love these? In other words, which vision are you going to go after? Because you can't do both. Is it going to be your vision for your life or Jesus' vision for your life? I think that's the question. And we're going to see over the next several weeks what Peter chooses. And wow, does God do way more than Peter ever would have done fishing on his own. All right, let's pause. Pause there for a moment. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to just take a moment and think about what's the one thing that's grabbing my attention today? What's the one thing that's grabbing your attention? And we're learning that that's probably the place that God's wanting to press into your life this morning. They're making a frappuccino. What's the one thing that's grabbing your attention? And what would the one who hasn't changed his mind about you yet, that's always on the shore, calling out to you regardless of what rejection you've had of him, what would he say to that in your life today? What would the one who is the hero and the king, what would the big brother say to you today? So Lord, I just thank you for these, your loved ones. Lord, you have such deep affection and care for them. I thank you, Lord, that you haven't changed your mind about them. I thank you, God, that you don't look at them and think they're a lost cause, that no one's ever a lost cause when it comes to you. So I thank you for them today, Lord. And I pray, God, that wherever you're speaking to their hearts, whatever's grabbing their attention, that you would pour out clarity, Lord, of how to move forward with it. You give them courage to take a step, God, towards it. Lord, show them the truth that your vision for their life is always better than their vision. Give us the courage to trust that today, Lord. Give us the humility for the character to be developed that needs to in our lives, God. Amen.